Good evening. My name is William Muir, and I'm very sorry that I'm unable to be with you in Geneva this evening. I would like to thank Atalanti and Eliana and all the other people who have worked behind the scenes to make tonight possible and for inviting Equal Community Foundation to present our work this evening. I'm a co-founder of Equal Community Foundation, and our mission is to raise every boy in India to be gender equitable. That is a social outcome that we call gender equitable boys. And we propose that it is not possible to ensure gender equality and a life free from violence for women and girls until every boy in India is raised as a gender equitable boy. Next slide, please. There are 230 million boys in India under the age of 18. And the UN datasets and other datasets support the idea that as many as 115 million of those boys will grow up to be physically violent as adults. And that 60 million will be sexually violent, and that includes rape. Those numbers are staggering. If you just use them to compare against the number of people in India who are living with violence or, with HIV/AIDS or malaria, you will see how big this problem is. And it's barely talked about. But with the recent scandals emerging from Hollywood and Westminster in the UK, you will see how unspoken this violence is. And that's one of the reasons why it's so unfamiliar. Equal Community Foundation believes that every boy in India must be raised to be gender equitable, and we will show you in this presentation how we intend to do that. Next slide, please. We do a lot of work as a sector to make sure women are empowered, that is, healthy, educated, and in jobs. We also look at the judiciary and the police, and we also look at broader economic development. But there is a big gap in knowledge and practice about how to raise gender equitable boys. Next slide, please. We believe that it is essential that this gap in knowledge and practice is filled, and that the knowledge and practice of how to raise boys to be gender equitable is scaled through the sector. That means that organisations who care about gender equality, who are already working with women and girls, learn how to raise gender equitable boys. And that's our strategy. On the left, you will see Action for Equality. It's the innovation. It's how to raise boys, and it's a curriculum and an evaluation framework that we have been using, we have built, and we are now sharing with other organisations. Those organisations are represented as the early adopters, and we've been training those through Project Raise. When those organisations are practicing also raising gender equitable boys, it's the collective knowledge and practice that will influence all the other organisations in the sector to start raising boys to be gender equitable. So that's our strategy. We're going to build programmes, we're going to build evidence that those programmes work, and we're going to use that practice and the evidence to build the capacity of the ecosystem. And that's reflected in our 3 programmes: Action for Equality, Research and Evaluation, and Project Raise. And those are the 3 pillars that underpin our organisation in this diagram. Well, Action for Equality really does change attitudes and behaviours in 15 weeks. And it also sustains that change over the course of the whole programme, which is nearly 50 weeks long. The inputs that we put into communities are mentors. They are field staff, and they work with boys aged 13 to 17 with the AFE curriculum. The result is, over the ensuing weeks, that boys who are studying this with their friends build more equitable knowledge, and they also learn to practice skills about their own behaviour and with others. And it leads to a change, a shift in boys' attitudes and behaviours towards women and girls. And what that means ultimately is that women who live with those boys report a reduction in violence and discrimination. And that summarises the inputs and the outputs and the outcomes that we seek. And this is a data set that just shows how boys' attitudes do become more equitable. On the left of these, on these two diagrams, the top diagram demonstrates boys when they enter the programme, and the bottom demonstrates their attitudes after 15 weeks in the programme. The further left boys are on that chart, the more their attitudes and behaviours support discrimination and violence. So the goal is to move their attitudes and behaviours to the right. And that's what happens after 15 weeks. You can see that the weighting moves from the left, discriminatory, to the right, which is gender equitable. There's more data available on how boys change on our website, and I can share that link with you later. Next slide, please. Project RAISE scales action for equality by building the capacity of organisations who work well with women and girls in India. We provide these organisations peer learning, finance, networks, and technical capacity support, and fundraising support. And what that means is that these organisations are able to start planning and then implementing the Action for Equality programme so that they can start raising gender equitable boys too. And that's how we are moving state by state, first of all in West Bengal, then in Maharashtra, to start raising gender equitable boys across India. Next slide, please. And here are some of the operational milestones. The top orange line reflects Action for Equality, which we really started as our first programme in 2009. We have since had two external evaluations, one in 2015 and one in 2016, where partners were practicing Action for Equality in West Bengal. Project RAISE, our capacity and scale programme, started in 2014, and the pilot in West Bengal was completed earlier this year in 2017. We also started planning Project RAISE Maharashtra, and that is launching this December. In the future, we will move into other states, including Uttar Pradesh, the city will be Delhi, and we'll be working in southern states and cities, including Bangalore. We also plan on establishing a control group and then moving towards a randomised control evaluation of Action for Equality. Next slide, please. And so it really is our goal that every boy in India becomes gender equitable. And through our pilots and our move into Maharashtra, we are demonstrating how that is possible, state by state, building the capacity of the best organisations who work with women and girls to start raising gender equitable boys. Next slide, please. And here's a little story of Yash to illustrate it. Now, this won't sound too remarkable, but what Yash is doing is, for the first time, he's actually started helping his mum, doing the chores at home. He's been cooking and cleaning, and he's doing this off his own back. The importance of that is that what Yash is doing is realizing that his mother is actually someone who he should be able to have a relationship with beyond someone who just helps cooking and cleaning. And Yash is saying, I can also, as a man, be involved in the cooking and cleaning and take responsibility for that. His mum benefits because she now has more time to do the things that are important to her, perhaps working in her vegetable stall, perhaps learning new skills, perhaps taking time for herself to do some reading or spend time with her friends. But it's these simple things where boys start taking responsibility for chores that are previously and historically women's responsibilities. That's where the behaviour starts. And that newfound respect for his mother also plays out in his language. He's less aggressive and he's more respectful. And that's the type of relationships that we are building with boys towards women and girls. Next slide, please. And here's a quick story of Project Raise. We actually started with over 80 organisations and we selected 12 who were able to deliver the programme with our technical support and some of our and financial support too. They worked in 44 cycles of Action for Equality across 76 communities. And boys who were enrolled in the programme were over 5,000. Over 4,000 graduated. That's nearly 80% graduation rate. And that's really important because the longer boys stay in the programme and the more who graduate, the bigger the change in their attitudes and behaviours. At the end of it, 52% of boys were high gender equitable attitudes and 43% were moderate. And that's a shift from boys who are otherwise discriminatory in their attitudes and behaviours towards women and girls. Here are 3 partnerships that we've been working on over the last 3 years. Hummingbird Foundation was our technical and finance partner in West Bengal. They care about preventing trafficking, and they realise that you can't prevent trafficking unless you also work with boys to make sure they respect women and girls too. The Novo Foundation works across India to support women's rights, and they're working with ECF to scale gender work with boys and men, and they're helping us deliver Project Raise. UNICEF is a new programme partnership that starts in January, where ECF is the technical partner providing our curriculum and our experience across 8 states of civil society partnerships and government partnerships with UNICEF. Our annual budget is approximately 300,000 Swiss francs. And so far we've raised about 120,000 Swiss francs for the financial year 2018-2019. If we can raise an additional 180,000, we will be able to work not only with 100 partners in one state, but 200 partners across 2 states. And we believe that not 10 pilots will be run, but 20 partners will start to pilot their work. So if you are able to provide us with any support in introducing us to other organisations in Switzerland, then we would be glad to talk to them about how we can meet our budgets for the future years. But right now we'd like to talk to you about how we can raise the profile of gender equitable boys in India, and that means improving our communications. So what we'd like to do is we'd really like to build 2 short videos that talks about ECF's journey towards raising boys to be gender equitable, and a second video that shows how organisations can join Project Raise, learn how to work with boys so that they too can deliver programs that raise gender equitable boys. And it's through these partnerships that Giving Women and Equal Community Foundation can make sure that every boy in India is raised to be gender equitable. So boys like Rishikesh are taking action to end violence, and we would really like Giving Women to be part of the solution too. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.